Hello, and today's question is, help, what do I do when it comes to assessing my writing? So this question is a great one because the person who was asking it was basically saying, I teach a bunch of lessons or I do, whatever my writing instruction is, and I feel like a lot of time passes before I'm really collecting data. I don't really know how to manage making sure all of my students are getting what they need. What do I do? So if that is you and you feel like, yeah, I could use a few ideas or tips or strategies around assessing when it comes to writing instruction in primary grades, then stay tuned. All right, welcome back. So let's go ahead and just jump right into this idea of data. So for me, data is going to look a few different ways when it comes to writing. I think about it in just different columns almost. So I have daily data, I have weekly data, and then I have unit overarching data that I want to collect. Daily data is going to come in the form of a quick check that is directly tied to my learning target. Weekly data is going to be a collection of noticings that I see throughout the week, a lot of times based on the data that I collected in my daily data. And it's going to be quick in the moment. I'm not taking these quick checks outside of that lesson. They don't come home. They don't get graded at the end of the week. It is instant data that I'm going to pull and then I'm going to make groups from them. And that's what I do across a week. And then there are larger overarching writing goals that you can't really say yes or no a student has mastered it or hasn't, because they are skills that have to be developed over time, and I'm going to be tracking them over time. A lot of time these skills are tied to a report card or something like that. And so if I'm thinking about data in those three different columns, what does that look like just for a teacher who's about to walk into a classroom tomorrow? So the first thing is if you have to figure out what it is that you're even trying to do with your writing. And I know I'm talking to the internet, so I could have teachers here that have a really tight writing curriculum. You have to teach it with fidelity and you can't deviate at all. And you're just like, what do I do? Then I have other teachers who are like, we don't even have a writing curriculum. I'm just pulling stuff that I find on Pinterest and we're printing it out and doing it for writing. So what do I do? So I'm talking to a lot of different kinds of educators. And so you'll have to take what I say and figure out like what that looks like for you. Okay. So it might look, what I'm saying may or may not work for you, but what can work or what could you tweak or change so that it does work for you. So for me, I am typically standards based. Okay. So when I developed these units and my process first framework, I was constantly doing units that were tied to state standards. And then from those standards, we created learning targets, and those learning targets drove the instruction. So the first thing we would do is we would sit down and we would say, okay, we're going to stick in this unit for the next 4 weeks. What do we want kids to do in the next 4 weeks? And we would identify just a few standards, because if you try to put 15, 20 standards in there, guess what? Jack of all trades, master of none. So we would collect maybe 3, 4 at the most. And we would say, okay, these are the standards we're focusing on. Then from those standards, we would break them down and we would put learning targets. So it might say, using words and pictures, I can persuade others to take a particular course of action. And that would be the standard that we used for persuasive writing. So we would break that down. Okay, we need a lesson on what does it look like to use words to persuade others to take a particular course of action? What does it look like to use pictures to persuade others to take what does persuade mean? That could be a learning target. Literally the vocabulary of it. So one standard could stretch out to 3 or 4 different learning targets, and each one of those learning targets would turn into a mini lesson. So I would do one lesson on what does it look like to use pictures to persuade others. So we've got standards, learning targets, that became mini lessons. Now that made it much more simple to collect data on a daily basis. So I would teach that lesson and then I would be able to see if my students were successful. So what I would do is I would create writing quick checks that you can see an example of right here. And these quick checks were always tied directly to that learning target. And at the end of my lesson, which I would always try to keep at 10-15 minutes max. Like if I'm teaching a writing lesson, you can get a lot done in 10 minutes. If you don't believe me, the next time you sit down, put your camera in the back of the room, teach something, and then go hit stop. You will be amazed at how much you can really say and model and do in a short amount of time. Plus, anything past 10, 15 minutes, especially if you're teaching kindergarten or first grade, it's probably going to be lost anyway, so you might as well. So again, you can see here, whatever the teaching point was, they would have to show me very quickly at the end of that lesson whether or not they got the lesson. And I would use this as a ticket, if you will, to independent writing. And so I would teach my lesson, I would quickly pass out these quick checks, they would quickly fill them out, and as soon as they were done, they would bring it to me. I would check it, and as soon as they give it to me, I'm making piles. And I'm saying, yep, they've got it. Ooh, I'm gonna check with them again. And I'm gonna take all of them. I'm not gonna do any coaching right there because I want my kids to go off and begin writing. But I'm gonna collect them and I'm making piles right real time. Again, because this data is pointless if I don't do something with it right there in the moment. I'm collecting data to inform my instructional decisions in that moment. If I wait till Friday, the moment is lost. I want to make sure my kids are with me right now. So I'm making piles, I'm getting them out into independent writing. From there, I'm able to say, okay, these kids have got it. These kids are kind of struggling with this. Another group is struggling with something different. I'm going to pull a small group immediately. I'm going to say, hey, I need this one, this one, this one, this one. Come on over here. We're going to do a quick reteach, sit them down, reteach the lesson, have a quick conversation with them to make sure they're with me. And then they go right back to independent writing. So that's what it looks like from the daily/weekly perspective. I'm doing that all week long. Now, the other component is a more, like I said, general overarching bigger picture, because we're working daily, but we're also building up to some big goals for the unit. And so what that looks like is that's your rubrics, right? That's your checklist that you are giving your students to check themselves, but then also what do you expect for your students to be doing? Are you teaching that in the mini lessons? Are you making sure and holding them accountable to those skills? So it's almost like concurrent circles that are going at the same time. There's like a daily collection of data, but then there's also a bigger and slower, unit-wide collection of data that's happening as well. So it's like they turn in a piece of writing, I'm gonna grade it up against maybe a rubric, and I'm gonna look and see how they're doing from that perspective. And that is how you really get a robust picture of how your students are doing when it comes to writing. The daily piece is so powerful because you can figure out where students are lost. I can remember teaching a unit on persuasive writing, and a lot of my students were just not really giving good reasons for somebody to agree with them. They were giving more like promises. Like they decided that they wanted something, like, I want to have a sleepover, so I'm going to write this piece and persuade my parents to let me have a sleepover. But their reasoning was like, I'll be so good, I'll get good grades, I'll clean my room. And I'm like, what are they missing? And so I did a lesson on the difference between reasons versus promises. It's actually a part of my unit. I'll put a slide right here. What is the difference between reasons and promises? And I taught the lesson, did a quick check. I had the students tell me what's the difference between a reason and a promise. And I could very clearly see, most of my class is still very confused on what a good reason is. So I knew I had to do some reteaching. I had to do some more, and I didn't even pull small groups for that because most of the class was lost. So that means it was me. It wasn't, them. It was my instruction that led them astray. So the next day I did a reteach for the whole group, and we really cleared up and did some examples and non-examples of reasons versus promises when we're doing persuasive writing. And so for me, that's a really great example of the power of using daily data in the moment, because if I would have waited till the end of that unit and had a bunch of persuasive articles with a bunch of silly promises that didn't really sway my opinion, what was the point? We're not writing persuasive essays just to say we wrote a persuasive essay. I'm trying to get them to the point where they understand conceptually, if I want to persuade somebody, I better come with a strong argument. I better provide solid reasons. Why? Because when they hit 4th, 5th, 6th grade, middle school, high school, they're going to be asked to do that exact same thing, but the subject matter is going to be much more intense, much more serious. And I want them to say, okay, I'm not going to sit here and provide a silly reason or a promise. I'm going to come back with some strong facts and examples. And that's the kind of work that I want to start even down in kindergarten. So with that, you can see one other example here. This is a paper that is inside of my Reimagine Writing program, but you could also just make your own, right? Just get a sheet of paper, divide it into fourths. I like to quickly jot down names. If I don't have time to do a full exit ticket, I'm going to be collecting data one way or another. So I might be walking around and collecting names for trends that I'm seeing in the class. Like, oh my gosh, none of them are putting space in between their words. Let me do a quick group on that. So I might make a list of kids that are doing similar things and collect those and then make those in the moment instructional decisions. The final thing I'd like to share with you to think about data is this exit interview that I love to do with students when they are done with a piece of writing. So what I'll do is I will sit down with a writer and I will have this little exit interview and I will literally ask them how that went for them. And I will go through the writing process because, again, if you've been here for any amount of time, you know I am process first in everything I do, even data. If you don't know what I mean by that, then make sure you jump into this YouTube page and just start binging content because you'll see the same threads through every video. Everything I do goes through the writing process from start to finish, and this is no different. So sitting down with a child and saying, okay, I want to just talk to you about your writing. How did it go? What idea did you pick? And I'm writing down what they say. Okay, how did the planning process go? How did the structure go? Was it organized in a way that you feel good about? And I'm writing down what they say. And then I'm literally just going to give them some yes or no questions. And I'm going to say things like, are you proud of how you structured your writing? And if you're thinking like, what? She teaches kindergarten and first grade, I would never ask them about structure. Structure is something that I actually teach all the time. I'm not going to get into it now, but yes, let's just say, long story short, my kindergarten students could identify the 3 main structures by drawing an image on the whiteboard because that is something that we took time to do. I made sure that they knew the general structure when it came to persuasive, opinion, and informative writing. So yes, that is something that we do. So I would interview them and say, how do you feel like you organized your writing? Did the structure feel good? Did you pay attention to your editing skills and revising? And I literally just go back and forth and I collect data on how they felt about their writing. Parents love to see this. They love to see how their child got through a piece of writing, what they were thinking. And then it's also a huge opportunity for me as the teacher to, again, find any gaps or holes or, oh my gosh, this is where my writer is really struggling. I can keep this. I can address the needs that I'm finding out. I can address the needs that I'm seeing because of this information, and it's something that is just really powerful. So this post-writing interview, I love to do it. The moment one of my students makes it all the way through the writing process, they publish, they send their book out into the world, they put it in our class, published book basket, and it becomes a part of our classroom library. Then I say, when you're done, before you go pick a new idea, come to see Mrs. Tab, and we're gonna do a post-writing interview. And I'm just gonna ask you about your book, and then you can be on your way. And I found that my students even really appreciate this because it helps them to be reflective on their own writing process. And they have said the most profound things during these interviews. And it's just a practice that I really enjoy doing. So with that, that is really how I deal with data on a daily, weekly, unit-wide, post-writing basis. Those are just some of the ideas that I have. Don't forget to check out the Reimagine Writing program. Everything you see in any of my videos is in a one-stop shop. It's a one-time purchase. If you are like, oh my gosh, gotta have this, my school needs it, let me know. If you need an email template to send to your administrators or Donors Choose or even the PTA, and you're like, I need this program, reach out, email us. We will send you an email back with a program catalog. There will be some text in there that you can copy and paste and personalize a bit to send to the people that you need to send it to get you in this program. And we would love to have you. So as always, if you found this video helpful, please do me a favor and subscribe. Share it with any of your teacher friends, colleagues that might need some support with writing. We put out new videos every Tuesday and Thursday, and I will see you in the next one.